The door to the nursery didn't just open, it shattered. Wood splinters rained down like confetti onto the plush rug, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the small, dim room. June didn't scream. She had learned a long time ago that screaming only told the monsters where to find you. Instead, she curled tighter into the back of the wardrobe, her body forming a desperate human shield around the bundle in her arms. The baby, little Leo, was finally asleep, his thumb tucked into his mouth, blissfully unaware that his father's stronghold was burning to the ground around them. The air smelled of smoke. It smelled of iron and blood, but mostly it smelled of wolf. Heavy boots crunched on the broken doorframe. A shadow fell over the room, long and terrifying, blotting out the moonlight streaming through the window. June held her breath. Her heart was hammering against her ribs so hard she was terrified it would wake the infant. She pressed a trembling hand over the baby's ear, praying to a god she wasn't sure listened to. Servants in a shifter's house. "I can hear your heartbeat," a voice growled. It wasn't a human voice. It was deep, rough, like rocks grinding together at the bottom of a canyon. It was the voice of death. "Come out," the voice commanded, "and I might make it quick." June squeezed her eyes shut. "Don't move," she told herself. "If you don't move, maybe he'll leave. Maybe he'll think it's just a terrified rat." But the footsteps didn't leave. They came closer. Slow, deliberate. The floorboards groaned under a weight that was too heavy for a normal man. The wardrobe doors were ripped open, not opened, ripped. One hinge snapped with a metallic ping as the door hung loosely. June looked up. And up? The man standing over her was massive. He filled the space, blocking out the light, blocking out the air. He wore black leather armor stained with fresh blood and a heavy fur cloak that made him look like a bear standing on two legs. His face was a map of violence. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw shadowed by dark stubble, and a scar that cut through his left eyebrow, disappearing into his hairline. But it was his eyes that froze her blood. They were amber, burning, molten gold that glowed in the darkness. This was him. The werewolf, Silas Blackwood. The alpha who had declared war on the rogues of the valley. The monster the nursery rhymes warned children about. He raised a sword, the metal gleaming dully in the low light. "Stand up," he snarled. 0345. June scrambled to her feet, clutching Leo so tight the baby stirred, letting out a soft, sleepy whimper. Silas froze. The sword lowered an inch. His gaze dropped from June's terrified face to the bundle in her arms. He took a step closer, the smell of pine and rain and copper flooding June's senses. It was overwhelming, terrifying, and yet strangely grounding. "A pup?" he asked, his voice losing some of that lethal edge. "A baby," June corrected, her voice barely a whisper. She backed away until her spine hit the wood of the wardrobe. "He's just a baby." Silas narrowed his eyes. He leaned in, sniffing the air. The action was so animalistic, so primal, that June wanted to faint. But she couldn't drop Leo. She wouldn't. "He smells of the rogue alpha," Silas said, his face hardening again. "That is Alpha Kale's spawn." "He's an infant," June said, her fear momentarily eclipsed by indignation. She pulled the blanket up to cover Leo's face, shielding him from the monster's gaze. "He hasn't done anything to you." "His father killed my brother," Silas stated flatly. "His bloodline is poison." He reached out. His hand was enormous, calloused, stained with the violence of the night. He reached for the baby. "No!" June twisted away, turning her back to the werewolf, curling her body around the child. It was a suicidal move. She knew it. You do not turn your back on a predator. You do not deny an alpha. She waited for the blow. She waited for the cold bite of steel. But it didn't come. Instead, there was a silence so heavy it felt like the room was underwater. "You," Silas said. But the word sounded different this time. Strained, confused. June dared to look over her shoulder. Silas hadn't moved to strike her. He was standing there, his hand still outstretched, but his fingers were trembling. just slightly. His golden eyes weren't fixed on the baby anymore. They were fixed on her. He took a deep, shuddering breath, his nostrils flaring. "What are you?" he whispered. "I'm the nanny," June stammered. "Please, I'm just the nanny. I'm human. I don't know anything about your wars." "Human," he repeated, testing the word as if it tasted strange. He took another step, invading her personal space, looming over her until the heat radiating from his body warmed her shivering skin. "You smell—" He didn't finish the sentence. He couldn't, because what she smelled like was silence. In a world of loud, aggressive shifter scents, musk, cedar, rotting leaves, she smelled like clean linen and vanilla, and something soft, something that made the raging wolf inside his chest suddenly, inexplicably, sit down and whine. It was impossible. A human couldn't be a mate. It was a biological impossibility. And yet, the urge to bury his face in her neck and inhale until his lungs burned was stronger than the urge to kill. 8:15. "The house is burning," Silas said abruptly. He sheathed his sword with a sharp shing sound. "We are leaving." "We?" June blinked, clutching Leo. You're letting us go?" "No," Silas growled. He grabbed her arm. His grip was iron hard, but he didn't bruise her. It was possessive. "You are coming with me." "I can't," June panicked. "I can't go with you. You're the enemy. You killed his parents." "And I will kill you if you stay here," Silas said, dragging her toward the door. "The roof is collapsing. Do you want to burn, little nanny? Do you want the pup to burn?" That silenced her. June stumbled after him, trying to keep her footing on the debris-strewn floor. They moved into the hallway, where the heat was intense. Smoke billowed from the staircase. Silas didn't hesitate. He scooped June up, baby and all, into his arms, as if she weighed nothing more than a feather pillow. "Hold on," he commanded. June gasped, her arm instinctively going around his thick neck. He felt like a furnace. Beneath the leather and fur, his muscles were coiled tight, hard as stone. He smelled of danger, yes, but he also felt like the safest thing in a world gone mad. He leaped. They cleared the burning staircase in 2 bounds, landing in the foyer with a heavy thud that rattled June's teeth. He kicked the front door open, striding out into the freezing winter night. The cold air hit June like a slap. She shivered violently, her thin nightgown offering no protection against the biting wind. Silas stopped. He looked down at her, seeing her tremors. Without a word, he unclasped the heavy fur cloak from his shoulders and swung it around her. It was heavy, weighing her down, but it was warm. It smelled intensely of him, pine, wood smoke, and male. "Stay close," he muttered, turning toward the line of trees where his warriors were waiting. The ride back to the Obsidian Packlands was a blur of exhaustion and terror. Silas didn't put her on a spare horse. He mounted his massive black stallion, a beast that looked more monster than horse, and pulled her up to sit in front of him. June sat sideways, cradling Leo against her chest, while Silas's arms formed a cage around her, holding the reins. Every time the horse moved, her back brushed against his chest. She could feel the steady, slow beat of his heart. It wasn't racing. He had just slaughtered a house full of enemies, and his heart was as calm as a sleeping ocean. "You're cold," he said. It wasn't a question. "I'm fine," June lied, her teeth chattering. "Liar." One of his hands left the reins to rub firmly up and down her arm, generating friction, generating heat. The touch was rough, calloused, but careful. "Why did you protect the spawn?" June looked down at Leo, who was sleeping fitfully against the rhythm of the horse. "His name is Leo, and he's innocent. He's all I have." "He is not yours," Silas noted. "I've raised him since he was 3 days old," June whispered. "His mother, the Luna, she didn't have time for him. I was the one who fed him. I was the one who walked him when he cried. He's mine in every way that matters." Silas went silent. His hand stopped rubbing her arm and rested flat against her waist, his thumb tracing the curve of her hip through the heavy cloak. Loyalty, he murmured, his voice rumbling against her ear. A rare quality in a human, and rarer still in a mercenary. I'm not a mercenary, June snapped, exhausted. I'm a nanny. You are my prisoner now, Silas corrected. But there was no malice in it. Just a statement of fact. And the pup is a problem. June stiffened. You won't hurt him. You saved him. I saved you, Silas said, his voice dropping an octave. The pup just happened to be attached. June's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know what to make of that. She didn't know what to make of him. He was a killer, a warlord. And yet, he held her as if she were made of glass. The fortress of the obsidian pack loomed out of the mist like a jagged tooth. It wasn't a castle. It was a stronghold, carved directly into the black rock of the mountain. Torches flickered along the battlements, casting long, dancing shadows on the snow. As they rode through the iron gates, the courtyard was filled with wolves. Not the shifted kind, but men and women in various states of dress. Warriors welcoming their alpha home. A cheer went up as Silas rode in, a guttural, victorious sound that made Leo whimper in his sleep. Then they saw her. The cheering died. It rippled away into a confused, hostile silence. Silas brought the horse to a halt. He slid off, landing gracefully, then reached up for her. Come. June hesitated. She looked at the sea of faces, hard, scarred, looking at her with suspicion. She was human. She was holding the child of their enemy. She was walking into a den of lions. They won't touch you, Silas said, seeing her fear. He reached up, his hands gripping her waist. I have you! She slid down into his arms. For a moment, her feet dangled off the ground, her face level with his. The firelight caught the gold in his eyes, making them burn. Alpha, a voice called out. A tall woman with silver hair braided tight against her scalp stepped forward. She wore the leathers of a high-ranking warrior. Her eyes narrowed on the bundle in June's arms. Is that Kyle's son? A low murmur of anger swept through the courtyard. Weapons were shifted. Growls rumbled in chests. June shrank back against Silas. It is, Silas said, his voice carrying effortlessly over the crowd. Why is it alive? The woman demanded. You swore to end the bloodline, Silas. That child will grow up to hunt us. He is a threat. He is an infant, Silas said calmly. He is a rogue, a man shouted from the back. Kill it! Finish the war! The crowd surged forward, a wave of anger and grief. These people had lost family to Kale's pack. They wanted blood. June turned her back to them, curling over Leo, her body trembling violently. No, she whispered. Please. Then a roar shattered the air. It wasn't human. It was the Alpha Command, a sound of pure dominance that forced every wolf in the courtyard to their knees. Enough! Silas didn't just shout it, he projected it. The power rolling off him was physical, a shockwave that snapped heads down and silenced the mob. He stepped in front of June, placing his massive body between her and his pack. He glared at them, his eyes flashing dangerous, warning gold. The war is over, Silas snarled. Kyle is dead. His mate is dead. This child has no pack, no name, no banner. He reached back, his hand finding June's, interlacing his fingers with hers. The contact was shocking, intimate, public. The woman is under my protection, Silas declared, his voice dropping to a lethal quiet that was far scarier than his shout. She is the new governess. She keeps the child. And anyone who touches her, anyone who looks at her with anything other than respect, answers to me. He scanned the crowd, daring anyone to challenge him. Is that understood? Yes, Alpha, the silver-haired woman murmured, bowing her head, though her eyes lingered on June with cold calculation. Silas turned back to June. The rage vanished from his face, replaced by that strange, intense hunger she had seen in the nursery. Let's get you inside, he said roughly. You're shivering. He led her through the parting crowd, his hand never leaving the small of her back, marking her, claiming her, though June didn't understand why. She was just a nanny, just a human. She didn't know that to the werewolf, she was the only thing in the world that mattered. She didn't know that the moment he smelled her, the war ended, and the hunt began. They entered the great hall. It was warm, lit by a fireplace big enough to stand in. Silas led her not to the servants' quarters, but up the main staircase toward the Alpha's wing. "Where are we going?" June asked, breathless, trying to keep up with his long strides. "My chambers," Silas said. June stopped. I can't sleep in your chambers." Silas stopped too. He turned, looking down at her. He looked exhausted now, the adrenaline of the battle fading, leaving behind the man beneath the monster. "You aren't safe anywhere else, Nyain," he said simply. "My pack, they are not kind to outsiders. Not yet. Until they accept you, you stay where I can see you." "On the floor?" June asked weakly. A ghost of a smile touched Silas's lips. "I have a big bed, little nanny. I think we can share without me eating you." He opened a heavy oak door, revealing a room dominated by a massive 4-poster bed covered in furs. A fire roared in the hearth. It looked like heaven. It looked like a trap. "Go." He nodded toward the bathroom. "Wash the smell of the dead off you. I'll watch the pup." June hesitated, then handed Leo to him. Silas took the baby awkwardly, his large hands engulfing the small body. Leo didn't cry. He looked up at the scarred, terrifying warlord and gurgled. Silas stared at the baby, then at June. "I won't hurt him," he promised, his voice soft. "Go." As June closed the bathroom door, her knees finally gave out. She slid down to the floor, the tiles cool against her skin, and let the first sob escape. She was alive. She was a prisoner. And she was sleeping in the werewolf's bed. Outside, Silas rocked the baby gently, staring at the closed bathroom door, his wolf pacing inside his mind, chanting a single word over and over again. "Mine." The water in the basin turned pink. June stared at it, watching the swirls of ash and blood, none of it hers, circle the drain. She scrubbed her skin until it was raw, until the smell of smoke was replaced by the scent of the soap Silas had provided. It smelled like sandalwood and cold air. It smelled like him. She didn't have her own clothes. Her nightgown was ruined, scorched at the hem and stained with soot. She looked around the opulent bathroom, her eyes landing on a stack of folded linens on a cedar bench. On top sat a black tunic. It was clearly one of his. With trembling hands, she pulled it on. The fabric was soft, worn from use, and enormous. It swallowed her frame, the hem hitting her mid-thigh, the sleeves hanging past her fingertips. She rolled them up, catching her reflection in the mirror. She looked small, defeated, a ghost haunting a warlord's castle. "I can hear you thinking," a voice rumbled through the heavy oak door. "Stop it. The pup is getting restless." June took a deep breath, opened the door, and stepped back into the bedroom. The sight that greeted her made her pause. Silas, the werewolf, the butcher of the valleys, was sitting on the edge of the massive bed. He held Leo like he was holding a bomb. Stiffly, arms extended, a look of sheer panic on his scarred face. Leo was kicking his legs, letting out sharp, testing cries. "He's making a noise," Silas said, looking at June with genuine alarm. "Is he broken?" Despite the terror of the night, a hysterical bubble of laughter rose in June's throat. She walked over, the thick rug cushioning her bare feet. "He's not broken, Alpha. He's hungry." She reached out, and Silas surrendered the baby immediately, his hands brushing hers in the transfer. Sparks, literal electric sparks, danced across June's skin at the contact. She gasped, nearly dropping Leo. Silas didn't pull away. He stared at where their skin had touched, his pupils dilating until his eyes were almost entirely black. "You felt that," he whispered. It wasn't a question. "Static," June lied, her voice shaky. "Just static from the rug." Silas hummed, a low, vibrating sound in his chest that suggested he didn't believe a word she said. "Feed him. I have acquired supplies." He gestured to a small table near the fire. June blinked. In the short time she'd been washing, someone had delivered a basket. Inside there were bottles, a tin of powdered formula, and warm water. "How?" she asked, stunned. "I am the king," Silas said simply, as if that explained everything. He stood up and walked to the window, turning his back to give her privacy, though his posture remained rigid, alert. "I commanded it. It appeared." June sat in the armchair by the fire, mixing the formula with practiced hands. As Leo began to drink, the room fell into a heavy silence. The only sounds were the crackling fire and the baby's contented sucking. It was peaceful. Dangerously peaceful. "You should sleep," Silas said, not turning around. "The sun will be up in a few hours. Tomorrow the pack will want answers." "What kind of answers?" June asked, fear creeping back in. Silas turned then. The firelight cast half his face in shadow, making the scar through his eyebrow look deeper, more jagged. "They will want to know why I brought a human into the heart of our territory. They will want to know why the rogue's heir is breathing my air." "And what will you tell them?" Silas walked toward her. He moved like a predator, silent and fluid. He stopped just inches from the chair, looking down at her and the baby. "I will tell them," he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper, "that what is mine stays mine." The bed was enormous, yet it felt far too small. June lay on the far left edge, clutching Leo to her chest, her back to the center of the mattress. She was tense, every muscle locked, waiting. Behind her, Silas lay on top of the covers. He hadn't undressed, save for removing his boots and his heavy leather armor. She could hear his breathing, slow, deep, rhythmic. It should have been terrifying, sharing a bed with a monster, but the heat radiating from him was seductive. The room was drafty, the stone walls seeping cold, but Silas was a furnace. "Stop shivering," he grumbled into the darkness. "I can't help it," June whispered. "It's cold." There was a rustle of movement. The mattress dipped. Before June could protest, a heavy arm draped over her waist, pulling her and the baby backward. "Silas!" she squeaked. "Quiet!" he commanded. "Wolves huddle for warmth. It is practical. Do not read into it." His chest pressed against her back. He was solid, hard muscle and heat. His arm, thick and heavy, acted as an anchor, holding her in place. June tried to stay rigid, tried to fight the comfort of it, but exhaustion was a heavy tide. Smelling him, that woodsy, masculine scent, did something to her brain. It made her feel safe. It silenced the panic. Within minutes, her breathing leveled out. Her body relaxed, melting back into his. Silas lay awake long after she fell asleep. He opened his eyes, staring at the back of her head. Her hair smelled like the lavender soap he used. She was wearing his shirt. She was in his bed. His wolf was clawing at his ribs, howling in triumph. "Mate! Mate! Mate!" Silas clenched his jaw. He couldn't bond with a human. It would make her a target. It would make him weak. A human mate lived a fragile, fleeting life. If he claimed her, he would eventually have to watch her die of old age while he remained untouched by time. It was a tragedy waiting to happen. He carefully lifted a strand of her hair, rubbing it between his rough fingers. "I won't keep you," he whispered to the sleeping woman, a lie he needed to tell himself. "Just until the snow clears, just until the pup is safe." June shifted in her sleep, letting out a soft sigh, and snuggled closer to him. Silas closed his eyes, defeated. "Liar," he accused himself. 28:30. Morning broke with the sound of arguing. June woke with a start, reaching for a baby that wasn't there. Panic seized her throat. She sat up, wild-eyed. The room was empty of Silas. But in the center of the room, a young maid stood holding a tray of food, staring at the bed with wide, scandalized eyes. And next to the fire, in a makeshift cradle made of a drawer lined with furs, Leo was kicking happily. "You're awake," the maid said. Her tone wasn't polite. It was icy. "The Alpha ordered breakfast for you." June pulled the blankets up to her chin. suddenly aware she was wearing nothing but the Alpha's shirt. "Thank you. Where is—" "The king is training," the maid snapped. She set the tray down on the table with a clatter that sounded deliberate. "He said you are not to leave this room." "I need to wash bottles," June said, trying to find her voice. "I need diapers for the baby." "I will fetch them," the maid said, crossing her arms. She looked June up and down, her lip curling. "I don't know what kind of spell you cast on him, human, but don't get comfortable. Alpha Silas doesn't keep pets for long." "I'm not a pet," June said, her chin lifting slightly. "I'm the nanny." "A nanny in the Alpha's bed?" The maid laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "We all smell his scent on you. It's disgusting. You smell like—" She wrinkled her nose. "Pray." She turned and marched out, slamming the heavy door. The lock clicked. June stared at the door. Locked in. Again. She climbed out of bed and went to Leo. "Well," she whispered to the baby, picking him up, "at least the view is nice." She walked to the window. The fortress was built into the side of a cliff, overlooking a valley of snow-covered pines. Below, in the training ring, she saw him. Silas. He was shirtless, despite the freezing temperature. Steam rose from his skin as he swung a massive broadsword, sparring with 3 other warriors at once. He moved with a speed that blurred the eye, a dance of violence and grace. June watched, mesmerized. The muscles in his back rippled as he parried a blow, spun, and kicked a man into the mud. He threw his head back and laughed, a sound that carried up the wind, wild and free. Then, as if he felt her gaze, he stopped. He looked up, straight at her window. Even from this distance, June felt the impact of his stare. He raised his sword in a salute, then turned back to his men. June stepped back from the window, her heart racing. She wasn't just a prisoner. She was the center of attention in a kingdom of wolves, and she had no idea the target painted on her back was glowing brighter by the second. 2 hours later, the lock clicked again. June expected Silas. Instead, the door swung open to reveal the silver-haired woman from the courtyard, the one who had wanted Leo dead. She didn't come alone. 2 guards flanked her. "Step aside," the woman commanded the guards. She walked into the room, her boots clicking sharply on the stone floor. She was beautiful in a terrifying way, cold, sharp, ageless. "You must be the human," she said, her voice smooth as silk wrapped around a dagger. "I am Valeria, Beta of the Obsidian Pack." June instinctively stepped between Valeria and the cradle. "Where is Silas?" "The Alpha is busy running a kingdom," Valeria said, inspecting her fingernails. "He doesn't have time to play nursemaid. He sent me to collect the child." "Collect him?" June asked, her grip on the chair tightening. "For what?" "To be moved to the orphanage in the lower village," Valeria said. "It is not proper for a rogue pup to be raised in the royal wing, and certainly not proper for a human whore to be occupying the Alpha's bed." "I am not a whore," June said, her voice shaking but loud, "and Silas said the baby stays with me." "Silas is a male," Valeria said dismissively. "He thinks with his, instincts. He sees a helpless woman he wants to protect. But the pack decides the fate of rogues, not him alone." She stepped closer. "Hand over the child. You can stay and warm his bed if you must, but the monster goes." "He's not a monster," June snapped. "He's a baby, and if you want him, you'll have to go through me." Valeria laughed. It was a cold, empty sound. "Go through you. Human, I could snap your neck before you blinked." Her eyes flashed silver. She lunged. June didn't think. She grabbed a heavy iron poker from the fireplace and swung it. It was a clumsy, desperate swing. Valeria caught the iron bar with one hand, stopping it effortlessly inches from her face. She smiled, baring elongated canines. "Cute," Valeria purred. She wrenched the poker from June's grip and tossed it across the room. Then she grabbed June by the throat. June clawed at the hand, crushing her windpipe. Her feet dangled off the floor. Black spots danced in her vision. "I will do the Alpha a favor." Valeria whispered, bringing her face close to June's. I will remove the distraction. June couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. She kicked out, her foot connecting with Valeria's shin, but it was like kicking a tree trunk. Leo, she thought, panic consuming her. Who will watch Leo? Suddenly, the air in the room changed. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in a second. A low, vibrating growl seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Valeria froze. Her eyes widened. Put her down. The voice didn't come from the door. It came from the balcony. Silas stood there, having climbed the sheer rock face of the tower. He was covered in sweat and snow, his chest heaving. But he wasn't looking at June. He was looking at Valeria. And he didn't look like a man. He looked like death incarnate. His eyes were entirely gold, no whites visible. His teeth were bared. Alpha, Valeria choked out, dropping June instantly. June collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, rubbing her bruised throat. Silas didn't rush to her. He walked toward Valeria. Every step was a threat. I gave an order, Silas said, his voice terrifyingly calm. I said she was under my protection. Did I stutter, Beta? She attacked me, Valeria lied, backing away. I came to help. Silas moved faster than thought. One moment he was standing there. The next he had Valeria pinned against the stone wall, his forearm against her throat. I smell her fear, Silas snarled, leaning in until his nose brushed Valeria's ear. I smell your intent. You wanted to kill her. She is weak, Valeria gasped. She weakens you. She is mine, Silas roared, the sound shaking the window panes. Do you understand? If you touch a hair on her head, if you even look at her with malice, I will rip your throat out and feed it to the crows. Pack rank be damned. He threw Valeria toward the door. She stumbled, catching herself, looking at him with a mix of terror and awe. Get out, Silas commanded, and tell the pack. Anyone who comes to this door uninvited dies. Valeria fled. The guards scrambled after her. The room fell silent, save for June's ragged breathing. Silas stood there, his back to her, his chest heaving as he fought to control the wolf that wanted to chase and kill. He took a long, shuddering breath, then slowly turned around. The rage fell off his face the moment he saw June on the floor. June, he whispered. He crossed the room and dropped to his knees in front of her. His large hands hovered over her, afraid to touch. Let me see. June tilted her head back. Dark bruises were already forming in the shape of fingers on her pale skin. Silas let out a sound that was half whimper, half growl. He touched the bruise with a feather-light touch. I'm sorry, he rasped. I should have been here. I should have known. You came back, June whispered, her voice hoarse. You climbed the wall. I heard you, Silas said, his thumb stroking her cheekbone. I felt your panic. It hit me like an arrow. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. I will not leave you again. I swear it. June closed her eyes, trembling. But this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from the overwhelming realization that the monster of the north was currently shaking because she had been hurt. Does it hurt? He asked, his eyes searching hers. A little, she admitted. Silas hesitated. Then, looking at her for permission, he leaned in and pressed his lips softly against the bruise on her neck. It wasn't sexual. It was a balm, a silent apology. I will heal it, he murmured against her skin. I will keep you safe, June, even if I have to burn the whole world down to do it. June pulled back slightly, looking him in the eye. Why? She asked. Why me? I'm nobody. Silas looked at her. Really looked at her, with an intensity that made her soul ache. You are the only person, he said slowly, who has ever looked at me without seeing a weapon. He stood up, pulling her with him effortlessly. He scooped her into his arms, carrying her not to the chair, but to the bed. He sat down, settling her on his lap like she was precious cargo. We stay here today, he decided. No training, no counsel. But the pack... Let them wait. Silas buried his face in her hair, inhaling deeply. Let them wait. As June leaned back against his solid chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, she realized the war outside hadn't stopped. It had just changed battlegrounds. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't fighting alone. The great hall was transformed. The festive tables were gone. In their place, a large circle had been cleared in the center of the stone floor. Hundreds of wolves, warriors, mothers, elders lined the walls, standing in silence. The air was thick with tension. It smelled of musk and aggression. In the center of the circle sat 3 figures on carved wooden chairs. The elders, 2 men and a woman, their hair white as bone, their faces etched with centuries of hard living. Silas strode into the hall, the heavy doors booming shut behind him. June walked a step behind him, clutching Leo against her chest, her eyes fixed on the floor to avoid the hundreds of predatory gazes burning into her. "Silas Blackwood," the female elder spoke. Her voice was thin and reedy, like wind whistling through dry grass. "You have brought the storm to our doorstep." Silas stopped in the center of the circle. He didn't bow. He stood tall, radiating power. "I brought victory, Elder. The rogue Alpha is dead. And yet his bloodline lives." The elder pointed a crooked finger at the bundle in June's arms. "You harbor the seed of our enemy, and you harbor the weakling who shelters it." June flinched at the word weakling, but Silas shifted, his body blocking her from the elder's view. "She is not a weakling," Silas growled. "She is under my protection." "Protection?" The male elder on the right scoffed. He was missing an eye, a jagged scar running down his face. "You threaten your own beta for a human? You neglect your duties for a nanny?" The pack whispers, "Silas, they say you have been bewitched." "Valeria disobeyed a direct order," Silas said, his voice rising. "She attempted to murder a guest in my private chambers. That is treason." "It is cleansing!" a voice shouted from the crowd. Valeria stepped forward from the shadows. Her neck was bruised where Silas had grabbed her, purple marks stark against her pale skin. She looked at Silas with a mix of hatred and desperate adoration. "I did it for you, Alpha," she pleaded, turning to the crowd. "He is blinded by lust. That woman, she smells of nothing. She is a void. She has twisted his mind so he spares the very child prophesied to destroy us." "Prophecy?" June whispered, confused. "Enough," Silas snapped. "There is no prophecy, only fear." "Prove it," the third elder said. He hadn't spoken yet. He was the oldest, his skin like parchment. "Prove you are not compromised, Alpha. Give us the child." The room went deathly silent. "Give us the child," the elder repeated softly. "We will take him to the cliffs. We will offer him to the winds. If the spirits save him, he lives. If not, the threat ends tonight." It was a death sentence. Everyone knew it. No infant survived the cliffs. Silas didn't move. His hand drifted to the hilt of his sword. "No. You refuse the council?" "I refuse to murder an innocent," Silas said through gritted teeth. "It is not about the child," Valeria shouted. "It is about her. He won't give up the child because she wants it. Look at him. He is a puppet." The crowd began to murmur. The sound grew louder, a growl building in the throat of the pack. They were turning. Silas was their king, but the elders were their history, and Valeria was playing on their deepest fears. "Step aside, human," the female elder commanded June. "Hand over the pup, and you may leave with your life." June looked at Silas's back. It was broad, unyielding, but she saw the tension in his shoulders. He was one wolf against hundreds. If he fought them all to protect her, they would tear him apart. He would lose his crown. He might lose his life. She looked down at Leo. He was awake now, blinking up at her with blue eyes. Innocent. She couldn't let them kill him, and she couldn't let them kill Silas. June took a deep breath. She stepped out from Silas's shadow. "No," she said. Her voice was soft, but in the silence of the hall it carried. Silas turned to her, eyes wide. "June, I won't give him to you, June said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. She looked directly at the elders. You call yourselves strong? You call yourselves powerful? You are afraid of a baby. A gasp ran through the room. You speak of honor, June continued, walking forward until she stood beside Silas, not behind him. But where is the honor in throwing an infant off a cliff? Is that the obsidian way? To kill those who cannot fight back? She scanned the crowd, meeting the eyes of the mothers, the women who held their own children. Is that what you want your children to learn? That mercy is weakness? Silence, human! The one-eyed elder slammed his staff on the ground. You have no standing here. She has mine, Silas roared. He drew his sword. The steel sang as it left the scabbard. The sound was a declaration of war. She speaks the truth, Silas snarled, pacing the circle, eyeing his own people. We are not butchers, we are warriors, and I will not lead a pack of cowards who murder children in the dark. He stopped in front of the elders. You want the child? You want the woman? He pointed his sword at the floor, marking a line in the stone. Come and take them. 55 minutes. The challenge hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. To challenge the Alpha meant a fight to the death. Valeria stepped forward, her hand on her weapon. She looked ready. She looked eager. But the elders hesitated. They looked at Silas, at the sheer, raw power radiating off him. He was the werewolf. He had never lost a fight. And then something shifted. From the back of the room, a young mother stepped forward. She was holding a toddler. She walked past the line of warriors, past Valeria, and knelt. Not to the elders, but to Silas and June. The Alpha speaks true, she said, her voice trembling. My mate died fighting the rogues, but he didn't die so we could become them. Another wolf knelt, an old warrior this time, then another. Like a dam breaking, the pack began to kneel. One by one, they chose their king over their fear. They chose the man who stood ready to die for a human and a baby over the tradition of blood. Valeria stood alone, furious, impotent. The elders looked around, realizing they had lost the crowd. Very well, the oldest elder said, his voice bitter. Keep the child. Keep the human. But mark my words, Silas Blackwood. He stood up, leaning heavily on his staff. This mercy will be your undoing. The winter is long, and the rogues are not the only things hunting in the dark. With that ominous warning, the elders departed, fading back into the shadows of the fortress. Silas didn't sheath his sword until the doors closed behind them. Only then did he turn to June. He looked at her as if he'd never seen her before. The adrenaline was fading, leaving him shaking. He reached out, cupping her face with his free hand, his thumb brushing over her lips. You, he breathed, are either the bravest person I have ever met, or the most foolish. Probably foolish, June whispered, her legs finally giving out. Silas caught her. He pulled her against his chest, hard, burying his face in the crook of her neck. He held her there, in front of his entire pack, not caring who saw. You stood beside me, he murmured into her skin. No one has ever stood beside me. June leaned into him, closing her eyes. She felt the vibration of his voice in her own chest. I told you, I'm not leaving. Silas pulled back just enough to look at her. His golden eyes were soft, vulnerable in a way the werewolf should never be. Then I am keeping you, he said. And this time, it sounded like a vow. He swept her up into his arms again. Leo sandwiched safely between them and carried them out of the hall. As they ascended the stairs back to the sanctuary of his room, June rested her head on his shoulder. She watched the shadows of the castle pass by. She had won the pack. She had saved the baby. But as she looked at the grim set of Silas's jaw, she remembered the elder's warning. The winter is long, and deep in the forest, far below the mountain, something ancient and hungry woke up from a long sleep, smelling the scent of a human in the Alpha's bed. The great hall was transformed, The festive tables were gone. In their place, a large circle had been cleared in the center of the stone floor. Hundreds of wolves, warriors, mothers, elders, lined the walls, standing in silence. The air was thick with tension. It smelled of musk and aggression. In the center of the circle sat 3 figures on carved wooden chairs. The elders, 2 men and a woman, their hair white as bone, their faces etched with centuries of hard living. Silas strode into the hall, the heavy doors booming shut behind him. June walked a step behind him, clutching Leo against her chest, her eyes fixed on the floor to avoid the hundreds of predatory gazes burning into her. Silas Blackwood, the female elder spoke. Her voice was thin and reedy, like wind whistling through dry grass. You have brought the storm to our doorstep. Silas stopped in the center of the circle. He didn't bow. He stood tall, radiating power. I brought victory, Elder. The rogue Alpha is dead. And yet his bloodline lives. The elder pointed a crooked finger at the bundle in June's arms. You harbor the seed of our enemy, and you harbor the weakling who shelters it. June flinched at the word weakling, but Silas shifted, his body blocking her from the elder's view. She is not a weakling, Silas growled. She is under my protection. Protection? The male elder on the right scoffed. He was missing an eye, a jagged scar running down his face. You threaten your own beta for a human? You neglect your duties for a nanny? The pack whispers, Silas, they say you have been bewitched. Valeria disobeyed a direct order, Silas said, his voice rising. She attempted to murder a guest in my private chambers. That is treason. It is cleansing, a voice shouted from the crowd. Valeria stepped forward from the shadows. Her neck was bruised where Silas had grabbed her, purple marks stark against her pale skin. She looked at Silas with a mix of hatred and desperate adoration. I did it for you, Alpha, she pleaded, turning to the crowd. He is blinded by lust. That woman, she smells of nothing. She is a void. She has twisted his mind so he spares the very child prophesied to destroy us. Prophecy? June whispered, confused. Enough, Silas snapped. There is no prophecy, only fear. Prove it, the third elder said. He hadn't spoken yet. He was the oldest, his skin like parchment. Prove you are not compromised, Alpha. Give us the child. The room went deathly silent. Give us the child, the elder repeated softly. We will take him to the cliffs. We will offer him to the winds. If the spirits save him, he lives. If not, the threat ends tonight. It was a death sentence, everyone knew it. No infant survived the cliffs. Silas didn't move. His hand drifted to the hilt of his sword. No. You refuse the counsel? I refuse to murder an innocent, Silas said through gritted teeth. It is not about the child, Valeria shouted. It is about her. He won't give up the child because she wants it. Look at him. He is a puppet. The crowd began to murmur. The sound grew louder, a growl building in the throat of the pack. They were turning. Silas was their king, but the elders were their history, and Valeria was playing on their deepest fears. Step aside, human, the female elder commanded June. Hand over the pup, and you may leave with your life. June looked at Silas's back. It was broad, unyielding, but she saw the tension in his shoulders. He was one wolf against hundreds. If he fought them all to protect her, they would tear him apart. He would lose his crown. He might lose his life. She looked down at Leo. He was awake now, blinking up at her with blue eyes. Innocent. She couldn't let them kill him, and she couldn't let them kill Silas. June took a deep breath. She stepped out from Silas's shadow. No, she said. Her voice was soft, but in the silence of the hall it carried. Silas turned to her, eyes wide. June, I won't give him to you, June said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. She looked directly at the elders. You call yourselves strong? You call yourselves powerful? You are afraid of a baby. A gasp ran through the room. You speak of honor, June continued, walking forward until she stood beside Silas, not behind him. But where is the honor in throwing an infant off a cliff? Is that the obsidian way? To kill those who cannot fight back? She scanned the crowd, meeting the eyes of the mothers, the women who held their own children. Is that what you want your children to learn? That mercy is weakness? Silence, human! The one-eyed elder slammed his staff on the ground. You have no standing here. She has mine, Silas roared. He drew his sword. The steel sang as it left the scabbard. The sound was a declaration of war. She speaks the truth, Silas snarled, pacing the circle, eyeing his own people. We are not butchers, we are warriors, and I will not lead a pack of cowards who murder children in the dark. He stopped in front of the elders. You want the child? You want the woman? He pointed his sword at the floor, marking a line in the stone. Come and take them. 55 minutes. The challenge hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. To challenge the Alpha meant a fight to the death. Valeria stepped forward, her hand on her weapon. She looked ready. She looked eager. But the elders hesitated. They looked at Silas, at the sheer, raw power radiating off him. He was the werewolf. He had never lost a fight. And then something shifted. From the back of the room, a young mother stepped forward. She was holding a toddler. She walked past the line of warriors, past Valeria, and knelt. Not to the elders, but to Silas and June. The Alpha speaks true, she said, her voice trembling. My mate died fighting the rogues, but he didn't die so we could become them. Another wolf knelt, an old warrior this time, then another. Like a dam breaking, the pack began to kneel. One by one, they chose their king over their fear. They chose the man who stood ready to die for a human and a baby over the tradition of blood. Valeria stood alone, furious, impotent. The elders looked around, realizing they had lost the crowd. Very well, the oldest elder said, his voice bitter. Keep the child. Keep the human. But mark my words, Silas Blackwood. He stood up, leaning heavily on his staff. This mercy will be your undoing. The winter is long, and the rogues are not the only things hunting in the dark. With that ominous warning, the elders departed, fading back into the shadows of the fortress. Silas didn't sheath his sword until the doors closed behind them. Only then did he turn to June. He looked at her as if he'd never seen her before. The adrenaline was fading, leaving him shaking. He reached out, cupping her face with his free hand, his thumb brushing over her lips. You, he breathed, are either the bravest person I have ever met, or the most foolish. Probably foolish, June whispered, her legs finally giving out. Silas caught her. He pulled her against his chest, hard, burying his face in the crook of her neck. He held her there, in front of his entire pack, not caring who saw. You stood beside me, he murmured into her skin. No one has ever stood beside me. June leaned into him, closing her eyes. She felt the vibration of his voice in her own chest. I told you, I'm not leaving. Silas pulled back just enough to look at her. His golden eyes were soft, vulnerable in a way the werewolf should never be. Then I am keeping you, he said. And this time, it sounded like a vow. He swept her up into his arms again. Leo sandwiched safely between them and carried them out of the hall. As they ascended the stairs back to the sanctuary of his room, June rested her head on his shoulder. She watched the shadows of the castle pass by. She had won the pack. She had saved the baby. But as she looked at the grim set of Silas's jaw, she remembered the elder's warning. The winter is long, and deep in the forest, far below the mountain, something ancient and hungry woke up from a long sleep, smelling the scent of a human in the Alpha's bed. The winter did not end. It deepened. Snow piled against the fortress walls until the windows of the lower levels were buried in white. For 3 weeks, the Obsidian Pack lived in a state of siege, trapped by a blizzard so fierce even the strongest wolves dared not shift and run. Inside the Alpha's chambers, the world was small, warm, and dangerously intimate. June had fallen into a rhythm. She tended to Leo, she mended Silas's shirts, and she waited. She waited for the other shoe to drop. She waited for Silas to realize that a human nanny had no place in a king's bed. But he never asked her to leave. In fact, he seemed to be building a fortress around her within the fortress. He slept closer to her every night, his arm a heavy band of iron across her waist. He woke before she did, stoking the fire so her feet never touched a cold floor. But he was pulling away in other ways. He stopped touching her during the day. He stopped looking at her with that golden, hungry heat. He became the werewolf again, cold, distant, constantly patrolling the corridors, checking the locks, staring out into the white abyss of the storm. "You're pacing," June said one evening. She was sitting on the rug, playing with Leo, who was gumming on a wooden wolf toy Silas had carved for him. Silas stopped by the window. He didn't turn around. "Something is wrong. The wind, it smells of rot." "It's just the storm, Silas." "No," he growled low in his throat. "It's him." "Who?" Silas turned then. His face was pale beneath his tan, his scar standing out in stark relief. The skinwalker, the thing the elders warned about. It hunts during the long night. June gathered Leo into her arms, standing up. "A skinwalker? I thought those were myths." "Everything is a myth until it tries to kill you," Silas said grimly. He walked over to her, his hand hovering over her shoulder but not making contact. "I have to go down to the gates. I need to double the guard." "Silas," June whispered, stepping closer, closing the distance he kept trying to create. "You're exhausted. You haven't slept in 2 days." "I can't sleep," he admitted, his voice rough. "If I sleep, my guard drops. And if my guard drops..." He looked at her, his eyes agonizingly vulnerable. "I can't lose you, June. I finally found you, and I can't lose you." It was the closest he had come to admitting what she was to him. June reached up, placing her hand on his cheek. His stubble scratched her palm. He leaned into her touch instantly, his eyes fluttering closed, a shudder running through his massive frame. "You won't lose me," she promised. "You don't know what walks in the dark," he murmured. He pulled away, steeling himself. "Lock the door behind me. Do not open it for anyone, not even me, unless I speak to you through the bond." "We don't have a bond, Silas," she reminded him gently. "I'm human." Silas looked at her with a tragic intensity. "We have a bond," he said. "You just can't hear it yet." He left. The heavy door boomed shut. June turned the lock, her heart thumping a frantic rhythm against her ribs. 2 hours later, the screaming started. It wasn't a battle cry. It was a scream of pure terror, coming from the lower servants' quarters. June froze. Leo, sensing her fear, began to cry. "Stay here," Silas had said. "Lock the door." But the screams were getting closer, and then she smelled it. Smoke. Not wood smoke from the hearth, but the acrid chemical smell of burning accelerant. Someone had set fire to the castle. Again. "No," June whispered. She grabbed her cloak, wrapped Leo tight against her chest, and grabbed the iron poker from the fireplace. She couldn't stay here and burn. She had to get to the higher ground, to the stone battlements where the fire couldn't reach. She unlocked the door. The hallway was filled with thick black smoke. Warriors were running past, coughing, shouting orders. "The gate!" someone yelled. "Valeria, open the gate! The walkers are in!" Valeria, the beta, the woman who had sworn loyalty. June kept her head down, hugging the wall, moving against the flow of the panicked crowd. She needed to find Silas. Suddenly, a hand shot out of the smoke, gripping her arm. "There you are!" a voice hissed. June looked up into the face of Valeria. But it wasn't Valeria. Not really. Her eyes were milky white, dead. Her skin was gray and sloughing off in patches. "Valeria," June choked out. "Valeria is gone," the thing wearing her skin said. Its voice sounded like dry leaves skittering on pavement. "She promised us entry in exchange for power. We took her skin instead." The skinwalker. June swung the poker. It connected with the thing's shoulder with a sickening crunch, but the creature didn't even flinch. It grinned, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. "Fresh meat," it purred. "And a pup." It lunged. June threw herself backward, slipping on the stone floor. She curled around Leo, bracing for the teeth, bracing for the end. A roar shook the very foundations of the castle. A black blur slammed into the skinwalker, tearing it away from June with the force of a freight train. Silas. He was in his wolf form, a massive midnight black beast the size of a warhorse. His eyes were burning coals of rage. He didn't just bite the creature, he tore it apart. He shredded the thing wearing Valeria's skin until there was nothing left but rags and dust. Then he turned to June. He was covered in black ichor. His muzzle was snarling. He looked terrifying. But June didn't see a monster. She saw her savior. "Silas," she sobbed. The great wolf whined. He nudged her gently with his bloody nose, checking her for injuries, sniffing Leo to ensure the baby was safe. Then his form rippled. Bones cracked and reshaped. In seconds, Silas the man was kneeling before her, naked, shaking, his hands gripping her shoulders. "Did it touch you?" he demanded, his voice a broken roar. "Did it touch you?" "No," June wept. "No. You came. "I felt your fear," Silas gasped, pulling her into his chest, burying his face in her neck. "I felt you dying. I thought I was too late." "The fire," June said, pointing down the hall. "Silas, the castle." "Let it burn," Silas growled against her skin. "Let it all burn. I have everything I need right here." They retreated to the highest tower, the stone cold and wind-battered, but safe from the fire and the walkers. Silas blocked the trap door with a heavy iron trunk. He wrapped June and Leo in the furs from the bed, huddled in the corner of the small room. Outside, the sounds of battle raged, his pack fighting off the remaining walkers. But Silas didn't join them. His alpha command had sent them into a frenzy of defense, but his place, his only place, was right here. "You said you felt me," June whispered into the darkness. "You said you felt me dying." Silas sighed. He pulled her closer, his chin resting on top of her head. "I did? But I'm human. Humans don't have mate bonds." "Rarely," Silas corrected, but sometimes the moon goddess grants a miracle, or a mercy." He took her hand, placing it over his heart. It was beating wildly, out of sync with his calm voice. "From the moment I saw you in that nursery," he confessed, "my wolf stopped hunting. He knew, he recognized you. You smell like home, June. You smell like the end of the war. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I am a creature of death," Silas said bitterly. "And you are life. I didn't want to taint you. I thought, if I kept my distance, if I let you go when the snow melted, you might have a chance at a normal life. A safe life." June pulled her hand away. She sat up, shifting Leo so she could look Silas in the eye. "Safe?" she asked incredulously. "Silas, I was a servant in a house that burned down. I was almost murdered by your beta. I was attacked by a skinwalker. My life isn't safe. It never has been." She reached out, tracing the scar over his eye. "But when I'm with you, when you hold me, that is the only time I'm not afraid." Silas stared at her, his expression shattering. "June." "Don't send me away," she whispered. "Don't let me go when the snow melts, please." Silas made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. "Send you away?" "June, I couldn't let you go if I tried. You are woven into my bones." He leaned in, his gaze dropping to her lips. "May I?" "Yes," she breathed. The kiss wasn't gentle, it was desperate. It was acclaiming. It tasted of smoke and fear and relief. Silas kissed her like a man starving, like he was trying to breathe his own soul into her body to keep her safe forever. And for the first time, June felt it. A tug in her chest, a golden thread snapping into place. The bond. It wasn't just a wolf thing. It was a soul thing. And it was singing. Epilogue. 6 months later. The spring sun was warm on the balcony. The snow had finally melted, revealing the lush green valley of the Obsidian territory. The fortress was still being repaired, scaffolding hugging the blackened stone of the west wing, but the sounds that drifted up weren't of construction. They were sounds of life. Laughter. June sat on the stone bench, watching a toddler wobble across the grass. Leo was taking his first steps, his chubby legs uncertain but determined. "Careful," a deep voice rumbled. Silas sat on the grass, his long legs stretched out. He looked different. The lines of exhaustion around his eyes were gone. His hair was longer, tied back loosely. He wore a simple linen shirt, sleeves rolled up, revealing the mark on his forearm, a tattoo of a sparrow, small and delicate, sitting on a wolf's nose. Leo stumbled. Silas caught him instantly, his large hands steadying the boy. "Up you go, little warrior," Silas murmured, setting him back on his feet. "Dada!" Leo squealed, grabbing Silas's finger. June's heart swelled so big she thought it might burst. Silas looked up at her, his golden eyes crinkling at the corners. "He called me Dada again." "He knows who feeds him the good snacks," June teased. "He knows who his father is," Silas corrected softly. He wasn't talking about biology. He was talking about the nights spent walking the floor with a teething baby. He was talking about the way he had legally adopted Leo into the pack, naming him heir to the Obsidian throne, defying every tradition to make the rogue spawn his son. Silas stood up, scooping Leo into one arm, and walked over to June. He offered his free hand to her. "Come, Sawi," he said. "The pack is waiting." "For what?" June asked, taking his hand. "For their queen," Silas said simply. He led her to the edge of the balcony, overlooking the courtyard below. Hundreds of wolves looked up. There was no hostility now, no suspicion. They saw the way their alpha looked at her. They saw the way she had healed their wounds, held their children, and stood by their king when the darkness came. Silas raised June's hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles in front of them all. "My mate!" he roared, his voice echoing off the mountains. "My Luna!" The howl that answered him was deafening. It was a song of acceptance, of loyalty, of family. June leaned her head against Silas's shoulder, watching Leo clap his hands at the noise. The winter had been long, and the dark things had hunted, but they had survived. She looked at the werewolf, the monster who had stolen her, the man who had saved her. "I love you," she whispered, knowing his wolf hearing would catch it even over the cheering crowd. Silas looked down at her, his eyes shining with a fierce, unyielding light. "And I," he promised, "will love you until the mountains crumble to dust." He pulled her close, the three of them silhouetted against the rising sun, a family forged in fire, bound by choice, and stronger than any prophecy.